Good morning, everybody. It's so great to see all your beautiful faces this morning. First of all, I just want to say, wow, we just had another great turnout for our fourth and final membership class of the year. We, including myself, we had 12 people back there today. We had a good little blend of current church members that just wanted to know more and hear a little bit more about what we teach about church membership, as well as people who are keeping the door open and potentially interested in joining the church. And I mean, when you factor in all the people who have been through the membership class, when you factor in the baptisms we've done this year, when you factor in all of the new church members we've added this year, when you factor in the professions of faith that we've seen people make this year, there is no doubt whatsoever that God is at work, that God is doing something, and He's doing something worldwide, but He's also doing something right here in this church body. And that makes me very excited. That makes me very encouraged. And I'm super, super optimistic about it. And it really is God's show. And as I was saying earlier back there, sometimes it almost just feels like I'm almost like showing up to a theater and just watching God put on this amazing show that we get to enjoy and watch and just glorify Him as He does it. In fact, I mean, you could almost say that it's almost as if God is guiding things along in the way He wants them to go, right? You could almost make that statement, which, coincidentally is also the theme, or incidentally, is the theme of today's sermon. It's the theme of what I want to talk to you about today. So I want you to recall, first of all, what we went over last week when we studied the raising of Lazarus from the dead, that truly terrific story, that great story. And I made the point over and over and over again that God knows things that we just don't know. He has access to information that we just don't know, that we don't have that access to. He knows all the scenarios. He knows how all the events are connected. He knows how, if this happens, then this will happen, or if that happens, then that will happen. Like he sees all of this in real time. And He knows all the ins and outs and all the intricacies. And He also knows the best way to get to where things need to go. And He can see that path in a way that we can't see. And so basically the point I was making last week is, because of all that, we can know for a fact that there are a number of really good reasons why, if you are praying for some sort of intervention, if you are asking Him to get involved in a particular situation, there's a bunch of really good reasons. If He delays, if He doesn't show up right away, there are a number of good reasons why He might be making that decision, and you can have confidence and assurance that He knows what He's doing, and He's making the best possible decision if He's choosing to delay in getting involved. But as we examined that last week. But what I want to do now is I want to chase that thought to its logical conclusion. Because we made some really good points last week, but now let's chase it to its logical conclusion. Wouldn't this also necessarily mean, everything we talked about last week, wouldn't that also necessarily mean that God has both the wisdom and the power to not only know the best possible outcome of every situation, but to bring that outcome about? That He knows what it is, but He also has the power to make it happen. And that even now, all that being said, all that being true, even now, He is guiding history forward toward the best possible outcome for history. Like, He knows where things need to go and how we need to get there. And even now, He is bringing that about, and He's working on that. That even if we don't necessarily like or enjoy every single thing that happens along the way, because we're not going to like every single thing. We're going to go through times of difficulty and doubt and hardships. Even if we don't necessarily like or enjoy everything that happens between now and then, He still has everything under control. It has not spiraled out of control. And that's really the idea here. And if there's still any doubt about that, after everything we've seen already, if there's still any doubt about that, my hope and my prayer is that today's text will put that to rest once and for all. If you will allow this text to speak into your heart this morning and allow it to transform you by the renewing of your mind. If you allow that to happen, this text today should put that to rest. I want you to remember, back in chapter 10, just one chapter ago in this gospel, we saw those religious leaders come to Jesus and demand of him, tell us plainly, once and for all, whether or not you're the Messiah. Remember that? They demanded that he make that clear to them. And we saw him try to reason with them. One final time, he tries to reason with them and get them to see just who he is and to understand who he was. But here's the thing, what none of them knew that day, as they were having that exchange at the end of John chapter 10, what none of them knew that day is that this was going to be their last chance to respond to Jesus. All these encounters we've looked at throughout this gospel, where he's tried over and over and over again to reason with them. And this was going to be their last chance to respond to him, and they did not know it. Just like unbelievers today, just like today when people hear the gospel, if you think about it, every unbeliever is only going to hear the gospel a finite amount of times. Might be twice, might be 3 times, might be 100 times, but eventually every unbeliever will hear the gospel for the last time. And then that effectively would have been their last chance to respond to Jesus. And the thing is, none of us know when that is. None of us know when that is. But at the end of John chapter 10, they had their last chance with Jesus. I've titled this sermon today, The Point of No Return. Because after today, in this text today, the Jewish leaders finally cross a line that they cannot uncross. Things get set in motion from which there is just no coming back. And yet, even though on the surface it may look like the events in this story are spiraling out of control on the surface, at the heart of the story, we see that everything is always under control. It is. And that God himself is moving history toward where he wants it to go. He's moving it toward a pivotal and a necessary moment that culminates with Jesus on a cross. And ultimately, the evil plan that these people in the story today are going to hatch is going to be used for good. That's what we're going to see. So I want to encourage you today with the truth that this train ride that we're on through history, this train ride, sometimes it's going to go through some scary tunnels. Sometimes it's going to go through some dark patches, but this train is never coming off the tracks while God's driving it. Ever. So if you haven't done so already, would you please flip with me to the Gospel of John, chapter 11. Today we're picking up and reading verses 45 through 57. And today we're going to show you 4 unlikely ways that God directs history that might surprise you. All right, so as we pick up in verse 45, let's see what the word of the Lord says to us today. Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what he did, and what he did there, remember, that's a reference to last week's story. He raised Lazarus from the dead. So many of the Jews who had come with Mary and had seen what he did believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. So the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered the council and said, "What are we to do? For this man performs many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him. And the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation." But one of them, Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all, nor do you understand that it is better for you that one man should die for the people, not that the whole nation should perish." He did not say this of his own accord, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation. And not for the nation only, but also to gather into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. So from that day on, they made plans to put him to death. Jesus, therefore, no longer walked openly among the Jews, but went from there to the region near the wilderness, to a town called Ephraim, and there he stayed with the disciples. Now the Passover of the Jews was at hand, and many went up from the country to Jerusalem before the Passover to purify themselves. They were looking for Jesus and saying to one another as they stood in the temple, "What do you think? That he will not come to the feast at all?" Now the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that if anyone knew where he was, he should let them know so that they might arrest him. I said 4 ways that God directs history that might surprise you. The first one is God directs history by incorporating the actions of unbelievers. That might surprise some people. It would be easy to fall into the trap of thinking that only believers, only Christ followers are contributing and following the plan of God, but that those who don't believe or who reject God are somehow undoing God's plans or working against God's plans or somehow unraveling God's plans. If this were true, if that were true, then we as the Christ followers would basically be working against the unbelievers to make sure that God's plan succeeded. In reality, the truth is, even unbelievers, even people who reject God and want nothing to do with God, whether they realize it or not, are only playing their part in a much larger story. And even their actions can and will often be factored into what God is doing, whether they're aware of it or not. So if you think back, for example, to the book of Genesis, think back to that famous story of Joseph and how his brothers sold him into slavery. Remember that story? They sold him into slavery, and then all the hardships that he endured while he was enslaved in Egypt. All right, all the things he endured. And it would have been very easy for him to lose heart and to become discouraged and to give into despair as he was not only sold into slavery, but then as he was slandered, as he was falsely accused of crimes he didn't commit, as he was falsely imprisoned and then left there to rot, basically, and then abandoned and forgotten when he helped somebody that said they were going to come back and help him and they never did. All of these things that happened to him, it would have been so easy for him to lose heart and just become despaired and discouraged and all these things. But then years later, after it became clear that everything he endured, all of those things, that Joseph's entire predicament had been premeditated by God to get Joseph exactly where he needed to be to save millions of lives at a pivotal point in history during a really bad famine. After all of that became clear, Joseph meets up again with his brothers. And if you remember the story, the brothers are horrified. They're scared. They realize this is the brother we sold into slavery. And they're expecting revenge. They're expecting him to be angry. They're expecting him to try to get back at them because now he's like the leader in Egypt and he's got all this power behind him. And do you remember what Joseph said to his brothers? He said, "What you meant for evil, God meant for good." And he realized that what he didn't know that day and what none of them knew was that what none of them understood that day was that they had these evil intentions. They had this evil in their hearts, right? But God had factored their evil intentions into his good intentions, and he had sovereignly incorporated their evil scheme into his good scheme. And so God brought about this amazing thing, and in the process saved millions of lives, including, and get this, including the very brothers who committed the evil in the first place. The whole thing came full circle. God redeemed it. God took these evil actions and redeemed them. This is what I'm talking about. God is so big. He is so powerful. He is so wise. He's all of these things that even when people rebel against him and do evil things and live out the evil in their hearts, he often harnesses their evil deeds and brings about really, really good things. I mean, it takes a really great God to be able to redeem all the evil in the world and make something good come out of it, but that's one of his specialties. And so as we look at today's text, if there was some way we could step back from the timeline a little bit and kind of see things from God's point of view and kind of look at these events in this story that we're reading today in John 11 from God's point of view, we would see that all of these seemingly random, seemingly unconnected, seemingly arbitrary events are actually all connected, and they're not so random. And there's a strand connecting them all together, and that strand is the plan of God, and he's bringing all these things together to make things happen in a very specific way. And there are so many elements in this story that you might think at first that they're just arbitrary and unrelated, but as we peel back these layers, we're seeing how God is using every single detail in this story to get history to where it needs to be. In this case, just like he worked through Joseph's brothers in the book of Genesis, he's working through these unbelievers in John 11. These people in the crowd who saw the miracle, who saw Jesus get raised, and chose not to believe, who willfully rejected Jesus, even though all the evidence was right in front of them. But he's still working through them, because now what they're doing is they're going to run back to these religious leaders and they're going to basically tattle on Jesus and report him to the authorities, and which is going to lead to them hatching this plan. And all of this has been factored in. All of this is part of the plan. And they're contributing to it, whether they like it or not, whether they're aware of it or not. They're contributing to this plan, and this is what starts the chain of events in motion. So this is just one of a long line of examples that we see in Scripture where God even works through people who don't believe in him, or maybe who do believe in him, but who reject him. He works through them anyway to make sure his things happen, to make sure his plan happens. So that's the first one. And that brings us to our second way that God directs history, and that is by ordaining governments and their policies. God works through governments, aka politics. He works through these things too. Now go with me here, because I think this is really, really cool here. But notice the fear in verse 48 that spurs these people into motion. Notice the fear in verse 48. Look at what they say. It says, if we let him go on like this, meaning Jesus, everyone will believe in him, and the who? The Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation. Their fear is that the Romans are going to come in and take away our place and our nation. In the original Greek, the sentence structure here puts extra emphasis on that word our. It makes the word our stick out like with blinking lights. Our place. God's going to take away our place, our position. That's what they're afraid of. Okay, so like if you've ever waited in line for a really long time, like in the old days, if you wanted to get tickets, so like me, I wanted to go to see WWF SmackDown, and we actually had to go to a Ticketmaster location and stand in line and wait for the box office to open. Not like today, right? But we actually had to stand there, and you get there as early as you can, and you get your place in line. And the last thing you want to do if you've been in that line for hours and you're at the front of that line is that you don't want to go get out that line. You don't want to go to the bathroom. Like you're staying there, because if you step out and leave, you lose your what? Your place, your spot, your position. These guys are at the front of the line saying, we don't want to lose our place. If Rome comes in, we're going to lose our place. This is what they're worried about, losing their position, their leadership. They're the religious leaders. And this is where these Roman politics come into play. This is where even governments and their policies and their politics come into play. Because the Romans, remember, this is important, the Jews and basically everybody in that part of the world at that time was under Roman occupation. The Roman Empire was at their peak. The Roman Empire ruled everybody. And the Jews, they're under Roman authority. But one of the Roman policies was that they allowed, if you were a conquered nation or if you were a nation that was subject to them, they allowed you a certain amount of religious freedom. They realized and they understood that it would be better because people would be less likely to rebel if you allowed them some modicum of their heritage, and didn't take that away from them. So they allowed them some amount of religious freedom, provided that you knew your place and you didn't challenge their authority. And so Rome, they had a list of approved religions. You could practice this religion as long as you knew your place and you didn't challenge our authority. The Jewish religion was already, it was on the list, but it was tenuous. Because the Jews, remember, they're fiercely monotheistic. They don't recognize a whole bunch of gods. They recognize one God. And so right there, just because they wouldn't acknowledge the Roman emperor as a god, like Rome wanted them to do, their position was already tenuous. It was this very uneasy, okay, we'll let you slide, but don't act up, don't get out of line. So it was already tenuous. So this is their situation. And the other thing you need to remember about the Jews is they believed that the Messiah, when he came, one of his things was he was going to liberate them. That was one of their things. He's going to liberate us. He's going to free us from Rome. So if you got this guy running around doing signs and wonders, and everybody starts thinking he's the Messiah, and he's raising all these messianic expectations and stirring up anti-Roman sentiment, because they're like, oh, now's the time, then they knew, follow the logic. If he keeps stirring everybody up, it's only a matter of time before Rome steps in and shuts this thing down. If this guy keeps running around unchecked, it is only a matter of time before Rome steps in and shuts the whole thing down. And guess what? If you're a Jewish religious leader and they shut down the Jewish religion, where does that leave you? You're a leader without a people. And that's what they're worried about here. So please don't ever think that world affairs and politics and things like that they exist in some kind of vacuum apart from what God is doing in the world. Because they don't. They don't. Like, as if God has nothing to do with that. Because we see here how even the presence of Rome and Roman occupation and even Rome's particular policies and politics directly influence the events that God is using to secure what he wants to happen. He's moving Jesus closer to the cross. And he's using all of these seemingly unrelated events. So even Rome's policies are playing a part. And for the record, that's not even the only way that Rome factored into God's plan. God, I don't know if you know this or not, but God used Rome very, very heavily in his plan. There's a lot of things about Rome that God factored in. Have you ever heard the term Pax Romana? You ever heard that? Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right because that's Latin. But it's a Latin phrase that means the peace of Rome. Because think about it, like up to that point in history, you have all these city-states, all these little nations, they're fighting each other, they're squabbling, this nation conquers this nation, these people conquer these people, all these things are going on. And then, well, it started with the Greek Empire, but then Rome came in and replaced even the Greek Empire, and then Rome kind of took over and solidified everything. And now, by virtue of their power and their reach and their authority, all of a sudden you have relative peace and stability in the world. They're not fighting each other because now everybody's under this one umbrella. Now, I mean, it's occupation, it's not voluntary, but they are under Roman rule, and there's relative peace. There's relative peace in the area because of this Pax Romana. Not only that, but another major contribution Rome made is they built all these roads. There was a time where if you wanted to get from this part of the world to that part of the world, I mean, you had to find all these like paths, and it was like in the old days in our country when people were still using like maps in the car, and they're like this big, and you're trying to find like how the different highways intersect with each other, and it takes you like forever to get from one part to another. But now we have like the interstate and that kind of thing. They came along and they built these roads that were actually like high quality roads connecting all the places in the world to each other and to Rome. And that's where we get the phrase, all roads lead to Rome, because they came in and they built what was essentially an interstate system. And not only that, but they patrolled the interstate system. So, all of a sudden you don't have to worry about bandits anymore. You don't have to, as you're traveling, I mean, you still did, but you had Roman patrols, and so traveling was a lot safer. It was more efficient. For the first time, well, maybe not for the first time, but you also had a common language now. the Greek language, which virtually everybody understood. Virtually. It was the common language, and everybody pretty much in the Roman Empire knew it, which meant you could write the New Testament, and you had an audience ready. Before that time, you couldn't have just written a New Testament book and expect everybody to be able to read it. But now you have a language you can write the New Testament in, and everybody can read it. And because of those safe new roads, and because of the relative peace of the Pax Romana, you can distribute that New Testament all over the world with more ease than you've ever been able to distribute it before. So all of these things work together. This was a unique time in history, and all of these things were working together, and God brought all of this about and then used it to get Christianity off the ground, basically. Do you know how hard it would have been for Christianity to get off the ground before Rome? Like, the time was right. The time was right. This was a unique time in history, and it was ripe for God to come in and save mankind the way he did, which is why when you look at a passage like Romans 5:6 that I allude to from time to time, Romans 5:6 pops and sizzles when you understand like how all of even these historical developments factor into this. Romans 5:6 says, "For while we were still weak, at the right time, Christ died for the ungodly." We like to focus on the part where Christ died for the ungodly, and rightfully so, but pay attention to the at the right time. This wasn't just some event that could have happened at any point in history. It happened at a very particular point in history, and it was the right time. It was the ordained time. None of this was coincidental. That's the point. None of this was arbitrary. God timed all of this very meticulously, including when the Roman Empire would rise and come to power and what their policies would be. He timed this. He made it be this way. So if you ever wonder, for example, and this is a question that comes up a lot, if you ever wonder what right does the government have to govern us, if that question ever comes up in your life, or you're arguing with your family members, what right does the government have to make laws for us, and that we have to follow those laws, you need to remember that one of the ways God directs history is by ordaining governments and their policies. That is one of the ways God interacts with history, which is why we have a passage like 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 13 and 14. Peter says, "Be subject for the Lord's sake to every human institution, whether it be the emperor as supreme or to governors as sent by him to punish those who do evil and praise those who do good." He's talking about submitting to the government. Romans 13, verses 1 and 2, the Apostle Paul says, "Let every person be subject to the governing authorities. For there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment." So here we have Paul and Peter both agreeing on this. And if you know their history, that's saying something. All right? That we have Peter and Paul agreeing that we are to be good citizens. This is a scriptural truth. Now, that does logically sometimes lead to the question, well, what if it's an evil government, like Nazi Germany or something like that? Do you follow them? Well, let's look at history. The Roman Empire was no pretty unicorn. The Roman Empire sure had its issues, right? The Roman Empire was very corrupt in a lot of ways. That's who's governing them when Peter and Paul wrote these words. That's who they're telling them to submit to. So let that sink in for a second. But there is the added command that insofar as we are able to live peaceably within our governments. And so what happens is, what Scripture would tell us is that insofar as you are able to, without violating the clear mandates from God, try to live peaceably within your government. You are never to violate God's decrees, but as much as you're able to, you try to live peacefully within whatever government you find yourself. And that's why we see them trying to exist peacefully within the Roman government, But we know from history there comes a time when Rome says, you know what, we're going to start killing you people unless you say the emperor is God and you resist and you reject Jesus. Like they mandated that. And that's when the Christians stood up and said, no, we're not listening to you. And so sometimes we're in those hard situations where we have to choose between allegiance to God and allegiance to government. That's when we disobey the government, is when they're trying to force us to disobey God. But that's the idea though. But as long as we're able to live peacefully within the government's bounds, we are to be good citizens. Same thing happens in the book of Daniel. You remember the Darius, I think it was the Median king. He made a decree that said you can't worship any other god for like 30 days or something like that except for me. Any other god, and he made it illegal to worship. Daniel said, my religion tells me, my God tells me I need to worship him. So you know what he did? He worshiped his God anyway. So there are times when we disobey. There are times when we have to honor our commitments to God. But insofar as we're able, we try to be good citizens. And that's what the scriptures are telling us here. Because again, God directs history. One of the ways he directs history is by ordaining governments and even their particular policies. A third way God directs history is by influencing world leaders. Influencing world leaders, as we see in verses 49 through 54. Notice who steps up to the mic in verse 49. Caiaphas, the high priest, comes walking up. It's like, I got this. And the first thing he does, the very first thing he does, he gets the mic and he's like, he butters them all up with this big old compliment. That's what he does. He butters them up with this compliment. He says, you people know nothing at all. Just, I mean, like, that's a way to start it off, right? Just get on their good side right away. You people, how would you like me to start a sermon like that? You people know nothing at all. I'm going to tell you what. So after he gets their attention by telling them they don't know anything, then he says something really interesting. His next phrase is very interesting. He says, do you understand that it is better for you that one man should die for the people, not that the whole nation should perish? That's what he tells them. Remember, this is the Jewish high priest. The high priest. This is the guy in the nation who is supposed to most reflect God and most represent God to the people. And he's standing here saying, I think the most expedient thing to do is for us to just kill this guy and be done with it. Because if we don't kill him, well, we're going to lose our positions. We're not, if we want to maintain our political authority, we need to just kill this guy. So this is God's representative saying these things. That's literally what he just told them. But then John, the gospel writer, he adds his own little commentary in there. And we see him doing this throughout the gospel. In verses 51 and 52, he adds his own little commentary showing us that Caiaphas did not say this on his own. These were not like his words per se. Those words were actually divinely inspired, and he didn't even know it. That's the thing. He didn't even know what he was doing. He thought he was saying one thing, but he was saying something else. As high priest, and as the closest thing to a prophet that the nation had at that time, he just inadvertently prophesied. God has divinely inspired him to speak God's words without him even being aware of it. And he has issued forth what amounts to a prophecy. This prophecy that this one man, Jesus, was going to die for the nation. But then he adds, not just the nation, but to all the people who belong to God all across the world. So he thought he was making this one statement, but God was inspiring him to make this even bigger statement. Not just the physical nation of Israel, but the spiritual nation of Israel. All of those people who would come to share in the faith of Israel and place their faith in Jesus for salvation. Jesus was about to die for them. And this guy just prophesied about this and didn't even realize what he was saying. But John tells us that God divinely inspired him to say that. And this is where, by the way, we come to the climactic moment in the entire, you remember we've been talking about the festival cycle. We're in this section of the Gospel of John that's all about the festivals and what the festivals represent and all of this. All of this from chapters 5 through 11, we've been talking about this in all the Jewish festivals, the Festival of the Dedication, the Feast of Tabernacles, the Passover. We've been talking about all these festivals, and we come to the climactic moment that all of chapters 5 through 11 have been building towards. We hit it right here in verse 53. This is the pinnacle of the entire festival cycle. From that day on, they made plans to put him to death. And so this is it. This is the point of no return. There is no coming back from this. There is no coming back from this. God's plan is rolling along. And he has used lost people to get us here. He has used political nations and their political policies to get us here. He's even used the religious leaders, the world leaders. This guy was a world leader. He was the top-ranking guy in the Jewish nation. He's used world leaders to get us here. He's used all these things to get us here. The fourth and final way I want to see with you today that God directs history that we're going to look at is God directs history by scheduling times and seasons. He directs history by even scheduling the times and the seasons. We already saw, because I already pointed it out, that this was a unique and pivotal moment in history. I hope you see that. This was a unique and pivotal moment in history that was almost custom crafted for Christianity to be able to emerge. Okay? But the thing is, God wasn't just sitting around waiting for the right time. That's key here to understand also. He wasn't just sitting around waiting. It's like, oh, well, I guess now's a good time as any. He actually made it be the right time. He created and brought about all the circumstances that made it be the right time. Understand that as well. The prophet Daniel, in Daniel 2:21, says this about God. He says, God changes times and seasons. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. But I just want to draw your attention to he changes times and seasons. God directs even the flow of time itself and the seasons of time. Did you catch the time of year in verse 55 when all of this is going down? Did you catch it? The Passover. Do you think that's a coincidence? Because I assure you it is not. Now, all throughout this cycle, we've been talking about the timing of all these events. He did this during the Feast of Dedication. He did this during the Feast of Tabernacles. And remember, all of it was relevant. All of it matched the season. Now it's the Passover, a season synonymous with God's deliverance of his people from bondage. A time when a spotless lamb would be sacrificed for the sins of the people and its blood smeared across a wooden beam for the forgiveness of sins. A time when all of these pilgrims, these travelers from all around are coming into Jerusalem, flocking to Jerusalem unknowingly to witness the most spotless lamb of all being sacrificed for the sins of the people and his blood about to be smeared across a wooden beam. I talked about this a few weeks ago when we did that big sermon I had about the Lord's Supper, how important the Passover is to the death of Jesus and how those two events are so in sync with one another. So we've been over this, and my point is the timing could not have been more perfect for what's happening right now. The timing could not have been more perfect. And again, it's not a coincidence that all of this is happening exactly when it's happening. It's not a coincidence that Passover fell right when all of this is happening. God not only timed all of these things and the rise of the Roman Empire and their policies and who's going to do this and this religious leader is going to say this. He not only made them do that, he made them do that at a specific time in history so that all of this would intersect right here at this moment in time for this event that's about to take place. God is orchestrating all of this. Think about it. All the times that the Jews wanted to kill Jesus. Think about all the times they tried to stone him or kill him, but they couldn't because God would not allow it. Remember, the text always said, but it was not his hour. His hour had not yet arrived, and so they couldn't even lay a hand on him every single time he got away. And now, after all of those attempts to kill him have failed, After all those times they tried to stone him and couldn't even touch him, after all of that, he's about to just stroll casually into Jerusalem and offer himself to them. He's about to just walk in and hand himself over. Because now it is his hour. Now it's time. And we see all these pieces just lining up perfectly in a way that only God could orchestrate. All of this is coming together. The place, the time, the season, the participants, it's all coalescing at this moment in history. And we see that there was never a moment. There was never a moment in any of this where God was not in control. Not one moment, not one event happened out of place. Not one single detail escaped his notice. Not then and not now. And that's what I want to leave you with today. A couple of weeks ago, I threw out a challenge. And I said, I challenged you at that time to rededicate yourselves to a radical obedience to the Word of God. Remember that? A radical obedience to the Word of God. This week, I want to encourage you to nurture within yourselves a radical confidence in the plan of God. So we have radical obedience to the Word of God, but also I want you to have radical confidence in the plan of God. Because everything is under His control. Everything. Did you hear that Earth now has 2 moons? Did you hear that? Anybody? Okay, technically that's not true. But we have picked up what astronomers are calling a quasi-moon. A quasi-moon. So we have a quasi-moon now. It's asteroid, I think it's like M2025 P7 or something like that. And they call it a quasi-moon because it's not actually orbiting the Earth, but it has entered into co-orbit with the Earth, and we're following the same orbit, and it's going to be with us till about like 2086 or something like that. We have this asteroid kind of following us, and they're calling it a quasi-moon. So, in a sense, we almost have like a second moon now. But Earth still has one moon, one main moon. But do you know that there are over 840 something moons in our solar system? Did you know that? Saturn has like 400 and something moons all on its own. So we got all these moons just floating around in space, right? And we look out into the universe and we see all of this. We can see a lot of this through our telescopes and stuff. We see all these, what they call celestial bodies. There's moons, there's planets, there's stars, there's all of this stuff out here. And to an untrained eye, if you're just looking up at the sky, it might seem like it's all just floating around in space. It might seem like it's all just out there, right? But it's not. It's not just floating around in space. We know that the moon orbits the Earth, right? So we got the Earth and we have the moon orbiting the Earth. And it's following a particular path, isn't it? And its path is dictated by the presence of the Earth, isn't it? But the Earth is rotating around the sun. And so the Earth is following an orbit. And the Earth is dragging the moon with it. So you got the Earth doing this, and as it's doing this, you got the moon doing this. The moon can only go where the Earth goes. The Earth is only going where the sun is telling it to go. The sun is following an orbit around the Milky Way galaxy. So even the sun is not stationary. So the sun is circling the Milky Way galaxy. The Milky Way galaxy is following an orbit. That I don't understand at all how that works, but it's following an orbit around the universe. So we got the galaxy, we got the solar system with the sun, and then in the sun we got the planets, and then the planet, we got the moon. That moon is not just going where it wants to go. So all of these things, all of these celestial bodies, this vast amount of space, all these things moving around, the universe is so big it boggles the mind. But it's all controlled. Everything in the universe. It's all following a pattern because there's something at the center holding it all together. And all these things are rotating and they're all being held in place. Nothing is just free-floating. It's all being held together. And what I'm trying to explain to you is that's kind of what history is like. That's what's going on with history. All these events are happening all the time, all around the world, all throughout the universe. All these things are happening all the time. And it may seem random. It may seem chaotic. It might seem arbitrary. It might just seem like they're all just kind of, but all of history is being held together at the center by something, or in this case, someone who is guiding it along. And every one of these events is leading, he's leading it all towards where it's supposed to be and where it's supposed to go. It's all being held together. And if this great God can use and ordain the actions of unbelievers, if he can use and ordain the actions of specific governments and their specific policies, if he can use and ordain the words of world leaders, if he can use and ordain the times and the seasons themselves, if he can make all of these happen and put them all together and work all this together effortlessly into his plan, if he can do all of that, then we can rest assured that every single event and action in our life, event in our lives, has its place and its purpose. All of it. And it's all contributing. It's all contributing to where God wants us to be. And I firmly believe this. One day, all of the genuine Christ followers, we're going to be in heaven. We're going to be at his side. And I think when we're with him and we have his point of view, we're going to be able to look back and we're going to be able to see all of the ways that all of these events work together for our good. We're going to be able to see it in a way that we can't see it right now. But we're going to see exactly how they all fit together. And when that day comes, I believe we're going to be amazed and we're going to marvel at this great wisdom and this great power of this great God.